Comes
Lights
up with
up.
the red light. We always have these foam covers, but here so we could see the light from the.
Yeah, because I don't see anyone.
Did it say 2 or 1? I think it's 1, isn't it?
Oh, mine said 7 of us. I'm gonna sign up for,
It is 1:30, and this is the January 22nd, 2020 meeting of the Planning Commission. Please silence all cell phones. May we have the roll call?
Commissioner Donenfeld,
Present.
Commissioner Irvin Jr.,
Present.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
present.
Commissioner Lewin,
Present.
Commissioner Song,
Present.
Commissioner Wormick,
Present.
and Vice Chair Maruzzi.
Here.
7 members present, we have a quorum.
May we have the staff report on the posting of the agenda?
Mr. Vice Chair, the agenda was posted on Thursday, January the 16th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Are there any comments regarding the agenda? Would I mention now the idea of moving something to the consent calendar?
Yeah, absolutely.
What I was going to propose, or am proposing, is that item 4A be moved to the consent calendar, but I want to certainly hear what my fellow commissioners have to say about that.
I'm in favor of that.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion to move item 4A to the consent calendar in a second. Are we going to vote this electronically? Please vote.
Oh, you need to.
Should we have a second vote on the acceptance of the agenda, or is that sufficient?
That is sufficient.
Okay, good. Yes,
I'd like to suggest that we also move 4B.
really, you? Interesting. Kathy, you had some thoughts about that, didn't you?
Yeah,
We've already seen it, AAC has seen it.
I just have one condition that I would like to add to it.
Okay.
So I don't know if we need a full staff report. It's the condition that got sent out to everybody.
Can you say what it was?
The condition would be to move the driveway from an area where it's interfering with sanitary sewer to the area where staff member Hirosho suggested, which is moving the gate to a different area. And I don't know if I can describe that absolutely accurately, Flynn, but it wasn't in the engineering conditions, so to add an engineering condition sufficient for the engineering department to be comfortable with the project.
I would recommend, Mr. Vice Chair, that we keep that under new business. We can keep the staff report short and keep our comments limited to that condition unless there are any other questions about the application.
I think that's acceptable, sure. All right. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on the consent calendar, non-public hearing items, and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Members of the public who would like to comment on items 1A, let's see what we've moved over now, 4A, 4B, 5A, and 5B, should comment under this portion of the agenda. Comments on public hearing item 2A may be made at the time the item is presented. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes is allowed for each speaker. If you wish to speak on any non-public hearing item, please come forward at this time. Give us your name and address for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Ana Escalante, and I'm here representing item 4B. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Donald Keck for the planning application that you guys have reviewed for a 2,500 square foot residence on a hillside development located at 2100 Toscan Road. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Planning Department, AAC, and the Planning Commission for taking the time out of their busy schedule to review this project. I'll be in the audience in case you have any questions or comments about the project. Thank you. I'm a little bit jet lagged. I just came from Sweden yesterday, so if I sound a little loopy, that's one of the reasons. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Seeing none, let's move forward. Item 2A, public hearing.
Mr. Vice Chair, we
the
need to
consent
do the
calendar?
consent calendar.
Yes.
So the minutes and item 4A will be heard together on the consent calendar.
For item, for the minutes of November 13th, I'm going to abstain because I was not in attendance. Any real revisions to the minutes of the November 13th meeting?
I'd like to abstain as I wasn't on the commission.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I also need to abstain because I was not present for that meeting or a member of the commission.
I see where this is going, so I guess we're going to have a vote of just those who were present.
I think that makes
Which would
sense.
be, what, three? We have 3 commissioners? Okay, we have that. We have 4 commissioners who were at that meeting.
And I only abstaining on the minutes.
Right. Okay.
Right. So did someone make the motion to accept the consent calendar? And a second? Should say second. There you go. All right, please vote. Very good. Oh, pardon me, I should have pushed abstain.
There's only two, if I've already abstained, do I vote yes if both items are here?
Let's see, Ms. Hintz, if I could have you reset that. What we will do is we will have you vote on the consent calendar. We will note the abstentions of those who are not voting on the minutes. So those who are not voting on the minutes, you are voting for item 4A. So go ahead and vote accordingly.
It's a yes vote.
There we go.
And Mr. Vice Chair, we are noting the abstentions of yourself, Ms. Warmick, Mr. Lewin, and Mr. Irvin Jr. on the minutes of November the 13th.
Very good. We will now proceed to the public hearing portion of the agenda. Item 2A, New Church LLC. The recommendation is to continue to a date certain of February 26, 2020. What is the reason for the delay?
The applicant is asking for a continuance of this item. So the reasoning being that they are working through the revised project, and with the understanding that once that revised project is through our process, they will not need the extension of the existing entitlement.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Hirschbein.
Where does the entitlement stand now? Did it expire?
The entitlement was approved, I think it was back in May of, excuse me, City Council approved the extension in December of 2018. So that was a one-year extension. They had asked for 2. So this would have been the second one-year extension to extend the entitlement for 1 additional year. So this is basically tolling that extension, which would expire this year no matter what. There would be no further extensions for that previous entitlement. But again, what the applicant is doing is revising the project and is resubmitting a new entitlement that would come forward to the commission, we expect, on February 22nd or 26th.
So 2 questions. You're saying that entitlement expired last month in December 2019?
It would have expired,
No,
but he has a request. It has not expired, no,
Because
because he has a request to extend it.
he has requested to extend it, and that automatically extends it?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the commission, I think I can comment on this. Yes, if they submit a timely application for an extension, then their entitlement will toll pending your decision on that extension. If the Planning Commission hears this a few weeks from now and says no further extension, yeah, then the entitlement would expire. But while it's being processed and being brought to you, it tolls for that period of time.
So when he next appears before us, he has 2 choices, right? He either starts all over again or he asks for an extension?
He could do both, yeah, correct.
And do you know which one he's going to do?
He's asking for a new entitlement.
So starting from scratch, go to AAC, go to us, go
Yep.
to council?
Yep, correct. And it's a revised project that expands the footprint to the properties north, which you'll see in the future.
So it's a brand-new project, really?
It's, yeah, in terms of its scope, it's similar to what was before, but it does expand the footprint of the project because he's acquired property to encompass the entire block.
Will we have any obligation to approve the portions that's already been approved?
No, you would review the case under the zoning code for the project and the merits of it that you see.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
It should be noted that the city council has set some pretty specific milestones for this project. And I'm curious how they're going to meet those milestones with these continuances.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, yeah, that's all dependent on the new revised project. So based on what the applicant has stated is that they intend to move forward with a new project, and the new milestones that the council has set, the applicant would have to adhere to these strict deadlines for moving that project forward if they were to utilize the hotel operations incentive program.
So regardless of the time extension request, the milestone dates will not change.
That's correct.
Thank you.
The milestone dates relate only to the TOT?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Song?
So picking up, is it the application fees that will be saved if it was an extension for entitlement?
No, because they've still paid the application fees. I think his interest is really just to maintain an entitlement on the property until he can secure his new project entitlement.
I see.
Commissioner Lewin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask that staff, when this is brought forward, provides a nice synopsis of the milestones and what's gone before, since we have so many new members on this
That's
project?
an excellent request.
Thank you.
I'd like to see that myself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Any other thoughts? No, apparently, if it's a continuance, we don't have to vote on a continuance, do we?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, then
I
we
would
should-
ask for a
someone want to
motion
make
and
a
a
motion
vote.
to do that?
So moved.
In a second? Yeah, it does. It should.
I made the
Sec-
motion.
Okay, who wants to second then? Okay, Kathy. So we have the motion, the second. Any further discussion? Please.
What happens if we don't vote to delay it?
Interesting question. What happens if there, yes.
If you don't vote to delay it, we would need to have you make findings as to why you would either approve or deny the extension at this point in time. So if you choose not to extend it, then you would hear the case and make findings to either approve or deny it.
You say here the case, well, the applicant isn't here,
That is correct. The applicant is not here.
and we would expect staff to be prepared to do that.
I'm assuming that Mr. Newell could give you a summary of the reason for the extension and whether or not it conforms to the criteria that we have in the code.
Well, I think that's an exceptional request. We've never done that before. The applicant isn't here. Staff is recommending an extension. They're entitled to their day in court. I couldn't possibly go along with that.
We still have a motion in a second, so let's vote on that motion, and then we'll see if there's any need to go further. Motion passes. All right. Now we're moving on to new business. Item 4B. Anna Escalante AIA on behalf of Donald Kick for a major architectural application to construct a 2,513 square foot single-family residence. Staff report, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As introduced, this is a proposed single-family residence at 2100 Tascan Road, and the staff will provide a brief presentation. Sorry, excuse me. I don't know why it's not working. Working.
Don't know. Are we having some technical difficulties? All right. Programming will soon resume. Yes.
If we could just have a really brief staff report, I don't think we need a full
I would agree with
report
that.
on this.
Based on our comments earlier, would the rest of the commission feel comfortable with not having the actual formal? Yes, okay.
So I just had one question of staff.
Commissioner Hirschbein, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I would just like to hear specifically what the issue is regarding this easement, because I'm a little hazy. So if you could just specifically,
Sure.
if
Commissioner
you
Song?
could just specifically address that portion of the project, that'd make me happy.
But can we consider the fact that we have 2 new commissioners plus Kathy, and perhaps this could be a normal process of what a project of this kind would be, so that they could,
As a learning experience?
yeah.
That makes sense.
I think it's,
I think so. Good, you both.
I mean, I do
Good
want to
idea.
leave early, but
All right, then let's do this. Noriko, do you feel that you can go forward with that?
Sure. Let's go back to the first slides.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, Commissioner Song. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, one more time. This is a proposed hillside single-family residential project at the Kick Residence. The project site is located within the Little Tuscany neighborhood in the R1B single-family residential zone, and the general plan designation of the site is estate residential, which is ER. So the site is really intended for a single-family residential development. This is the area view of the project site. The property includes a portion of the former Tuscan Road, which was vacated in 2006. And that's the reason why this area view shows the road as a part of the property. The project site currently appears the hillside for a vacant lot with existing vegetation such as cacti, palo verde, creosote with exposed boulders. It's a hillside and it slopes down from the west side to the east side, and elevation difference is approximately 9.5 feet. The project proposes the construction of a 2,513 square foot single-story, single-family residence on a parcel which is 22,328 square feet. The project proposes the use of different materials such as concrete, aluminum, galvanized metal, and fiberglass to create a single-family residence. This is a proposed rendering viewed from the south elevation. And this is the southwest elevation of the proposed residence and southeast elevation of the proposed residence. And these are the elevations. The single-family residence will have a flat roof, horizontal, and asymmetric massing. And again, because it's a hillside, the site slopes down. And this is to show how the property will be situated on the property. The project proposes the use of drought-tolerant plant materials such as oak and California pepper tree, I believe. The intent of the design is to maintain the natural appearance of the site and use plant materials to accentuate the overall property. This project was reviewed by the Architectural Advisory Committee, and after receiving some comments at the meeting, the applicant made some changes to the plan. And the image on the right side, the Planning Commission review, that's the document that you're reviewing today. And as you see, the applicant added a concrete pad in the rear of the garage for maneuvering vehicles, and then also swapped the proposed spas with the fire pits, and relocated a spa to the front pool area. And the main thing is the proposed installation of the gate on the Via Escuela frontage. The property has an existing sanitary sewer easement on the Tuscan Road. It's shown in red here. and the project proposes the installation of the gate on top of it, which is going to interfere with the easement. The applicant has an option of installing a gate parallel to the sewer line if the property owner wishes to do so. And staff has imposed a condition which requires the proposed gate to not interfere with the sanitary sewer easement. And based on the submitted plans, the proposed project is consistent with the intent of the general plan, meets the applicable zoning regulations. It is architecturally appropriate for the site and its surroundings, and the project proposes appropriate plant palette for the desert environment. And again, the only issue is the proposed gate. Staff contacted applicant, and applicant is aware of this issue and the proposed or the alternative gate installation location. And considering these facts and information, the staff recommends the Planning Commission to approve the project subject to the conditions of approval included in Exhibit A. And this concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Commissioner?
Is it appropriate also to ask the applicant a question?
Well, if we want to go through this the typical way, we'd
That's
first go
fine.
through
I'll wait,
questions of
'cause
staff.
My question is for the applicant.
Any questions for staff?
Exhibit A is that drawing you showed us where you're proposing the gate, is that right?
Exhibit A is the conditions of approval.
Oh,
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Song?
This is more for Rick. So this is a moving gate over the easement. Situations like this before, have they occurred where we actually do have movable gate over an easement? I would have to say yes.
Well, the difference in this is, excuse me, the difference in this is when the city vacated this portion of Tuscan Road, we reserved an easement over it because there's an active live sewer in the road. If you vacate a road, it becomes part of the property. Therefore, it becomes a private road. If they want to put a gate over it, it's typically not an issue. If this was simply a sewer main in Via Escuela with a sewer lateral in that portion of Tuscan Road that was serving the property, then it just becomes a private lateral and they can put up a gate and it's no harm, no foul. In this case, we reserved an easement for an 8-inch sewer main with, I think there's 2 manholes in that area. And we would prefer that that stay open so that Veolia can go in there and maintain and clean and sewer. And they don't want to have to look for a gate code or anything like that. So that's just something we just don't do.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Lewin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was wondering if the Exhibit A includes the requirement that the gate be moved to the other location.
It does. It's actually the conditions of approval, PLN1. That's under Planning Department conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right, I believe the applicant is present. Please come up to the microphone, give your name and address. You have 10 minutes to present and 2 minutes of rebuttal, if desired.
Not a public hearing.
Like I said, it's not a public hearing. Thank you for coming.
I just have a question. The real question, the only question I have is the alternate gate location. Does that work for you, or do you need to make any changes because your applicant would like a different location on the property?
no.
You have to turn, let's see.
Hello? Oh, now it's working.
There we
Is
go.
it working?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Ana Escalante, and I'm the architect for the project. I need to identify myself, I suppose. The question, it wouldn't affect the project, really. The only concern we had was that we didn't want to have an empty road, if you will, that, it can become a hazard just due to vagrancy and those sorts of issues. But other than that, in one of the early sketches we actually had the gate what we're planning is suggesting that we place it. So it wouldn't affect us from the point of view of moving forward.
The other question was the easement didn't appear to be in the center of the road. But there might have been the possibility of, I guess there isn't a possibility with engineering of only blocking part of the road and still maintaining the easement. Because it's not centered on the road, so depending on how wide the road is, they might be able to gate around that, and is that acceptable?
Unfortunately for us, we reserved an easement over the entire portion of Tuscan Road that was vacated.
I see, okay. So it's acceptable
Yeah.
to you?
It is. It is.
Thank you.
It will work.
Any other questions of the applicant? Well, would someone like to make Commissioner Hirschbein? Very good. And second,
I made a motion, I think, actually.
Commissioner Ware, there you go. And who will second?
And making it, I just want to say it's an absolutely lovely project. I'm sorry you can't do what you want to do with the road, but
I really think that it's going to be a good project, so it will work. We'll
Okay,
make it
thank you.
work.
And the second is by Commissioner Hirschbein. Any comments? Okay.
I just also want to say, Anna, it's just such a beautiful project. My only disappointment is you're not spending enough time with us in Palm Springs.
Yes, I love coming to Palm Springs.
We love seeing
And
you.
once construction starts, I'm hoping that I'll be here at least for 6 months.
Good, good.
Yeah, I'm tired of the cold. Yeah, but you learn a lot, you know. I mean, I never thought that I would learn so much working with other architects.
Yeah, very good.
So, thank you.
All right, let's vote. Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Have a good
It'll be a great
afternoon.
project.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to other business. Item 5A, discussion of General Plan Steering Committee appointees.
Mr. Vice Chair and members of the commission, we are going to discuss the appointees to our General Plan Steering Committee. Just as background for the new members of the Planning Commission, we have embarked on a limited update to the city's general plan. City Council has given us funding to particularly look at the land use element, the housing element, and the circulation element. As part of that, we had proposed to the Planning Commission the use of a steering committee to assist in the efforts of looking at the updates to the general plan. As part of that, I had suggested to the Planning Commission that we keep the steering committee relatively small in order that all members would be able to actively participate in those discussions. And here is what I had proposed in terms of the membership. That number one, we would have a representative from each of the new 5 council districts. We would also have a representative of the 1PS organization, a representative of the tribe, and then a representative of the Planning Commission. One of the things that I am proposing to you today that is different than what I have discussed with you in the past is that we also appoint a representative of the Sustainability Commission. This was something that was recommended to me by members of the City Council, feeling that we need to bring the goals of our sustainability plan into the general plan as well. And so with that, I have reached out to the following individuals. For Council District 1, Dixie Miller has agreed to be the representative there. For Council District 2, Grant Wilson, who formerly was on the Sustainability Commission, has agreed to serve in that post. Council District 3, David Powell, who was with the 1PS organization and is a former planning commissioner from the city of Walnut Creek. Council District 4, Lynn Callardine, who is a former planning commissioner. Council District 5, Mr. Kurt Watts, who has been involved in the 1PS organization and also has economic development experience with the city of Palm Springs and other cities here in the valley. In terms of the 1PS representative, I've invited Kathy Cohn, who is the president of 1PS currently, or the chair of 1PS currently. And then from the Sustainability Commission, I've invited Mr. John Goins to serve as the representative from the Sustainability Commission. And then finally from the tribe, Ms. Margaret Park would be the representative from the tribe. The one thing that I need your decision for today is to appoint a member of the Planning Commission to serve on the steering committee as well. And so with that, Mr. Vice Chair, I'll turn the discussion over to the Planning Commission to discuss who should be the representative from the Planning Commission on that steering committee.
Thank you. I'm assuming that some of us have thought through who might be interested in this. Anyone want to speak about that? Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes, I've thought a bit about it, and I believe that Commissioner Wermick would be an appropriate member of our commission to represent us and the city in the endeavor.
Anyone else here to discuss? Commissioner Song?
Do we make motions? Is that what we do? Yeah.
Or we can have some more discussion.
I know you're trying to keep this group small, but also I believe I believe with you, Michael, that Kathy will be an excellent choice, but so would be Peter. And I was wondering if there could be two represented, since we are the body who does review with the zoning and general plan as a critical guide to all the projects that we're looking at this. So I would like to have two people if that could be considered. And obviously, Peter, I haven't asked you, but.
Mr. Vice Chair, I would say I would leave that to the discretion of the Planning Commission. Again, I'd like to keep it small, but I don't see that there would be any harm in having two representatives from the Planning Commission if you so decide to do that.
Well, you've thought this through very carefully. I think I'd like to stick with the one representative. I think that's appropriate. So I'd have to say no, but thank you. I appreciate the honor. We do. Oh, enough of that. Hey. So we do have a motion by Commissioner Hirschbein, and someone make a second? Commissioner Song. Please vote. There you go. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, let me just give you some additional information. Our first steering committee meeting is going to be on Monday, January 27th, so that's right around the corner. We are also planning our first community outreach meeting at the end of February, I believe the week of February the 24th. And so the steering committee will work with us to send out notices and make sure that the public is aware to participate in that. After we have that first public community meeting, I think it would be appropriate to have a study session with the Planning Commission to discuss the input that we received at that meeting and take direction from you all in terms of how we proceed. So I just wanted to lay out a tentative schedule for the next 2 months in terms of the participation that we would like to have from the Planning Commission on that.
Commissioner Wermuth?
Yeah, just on a slightly different note, and thank you very much for your appointment and faith in me on this. As I looked at this, I just have some concerns that we don't have representatives of the housing community, both affordable housing and builders. Commissioner Lewin mentioned that to me, and I was looking at the business community, the tourism community. I'm assuming sustainability can cover sort of our city's environmental movement. But I just was concerned about that. So as we get, if this is the body you want, as we get to those items, are you open to, as say we get into land use or we get into the housing element, inviting additional people to those meetings who have that expertise and those interests?
Absolutely. I don't think they would be permanent members of the steering committee, but we would invite them to participate in those discussions and offer their input in terms of their specific issues. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's the main concern I had.
Okay.
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Pauline, I just wanted to say, I think it's all of us are very concerned about being a part of this process. I think we as planning commissioners have that responsibility. And it sounds like you've created a construct whereby we will be a sounding board and we will hear from all the public. And the study sessions, I think, are always a good idea for us to deliberate. So it sounds as though you're planning on including us in a material way as this process moves forward, and I appreciate that.
And I want to reiterate, the Planning Commission is really the key body that is responsible for the general plan. And so as we go through this update process, yes, absolutely, we are going to involve you in every step of the way. And so I appreciate that, but yes, we will involve you.
Yeah, it was kind of that as a question, like what specifically is our duties, responsibilities, involvement? Will we be voting on it? Will we be voting on it in pieces? Will we be, I mean, how do you see the mechanism for our participation?
The mechanism will be two different ways. Number one, as I've mentioned, study sessions will be an important part of the process for you all as we go through the update. But then secondly, you all will be making recommendations to the City Council once we get the proposed amendments to each of those three elements finalized. And so you'll be going through those elements, determining if the amendments are appropriate, if they cover everything that they need to cover, and then finalizing your recommendation to the City Council. So again, you play a key role in reviewing the updated language to each of the elements, the land use element, the housing element, the circulation element, and what is forwarded on to City Council. You are really the ones who make that determination.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lewin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand then the steering committee is an advisory group that's being convened, and all of that information will be brought to us for a formal vote, which is essentially a recommendation to council to adopt for the general plan.
Correct.
Process.
Correct.
Commissioner Wermuck?
And the process would look somewhat like what we did with the PD, the Plan Development District Advisory Group, except that it would be coming back to the Planning Commission much more frequently than the work on that body came back.
Yes.
And are we anticipating we'd get a report once a month?
Exactly. As we have indicated in the past to the Planning Commission, we intend to have as a standing agenda item once a month a report from the steering committee and on the general plan update process in general.
Commissioner Urban?
How long are you guys looking to keep these people here in these positions? Are they just permanent positions? Are they,
We anticipate that we'll have about 8 meetings of the steering committee. Most of the meetings will be completed by about June of this year, but we will need them again at the very tail end of the process as we move forward to Planning Commission and City Council for approval of the update. So at least through the end of 2020 and then into early 2021. And again, a total of 8 meetings.
Any further comments or thoughts? All right, thank you.
Okay.
Before we move on to item 5B, I just want to welcome our 3 new or returning members of the Planning Commission. Former Council member Paul Lewin, welcome. Charlie Irvin Jr., welcome. And Kathy Wermuck, welcome back. So now it's time for election of officers. We have 2, chair and vice chair. Flynn, would you like to handle that?
Certainly, we'll go ahead and open that up. I would be seeking a nomination for chair of the Planning Commission.
I am nominating Kathy Wermuck to chair of the Planning Commission. Yes.
Well, I would say that I would have liked to have remained and still would like to remain chair. I'm a little unpolished at this point, but I'm learning, and I think that's part of the whole process of being on the Planning Commission, but, you know, that's my feeling about it. And if after this vote, I guess since there's already a first and a second, then we'll just see what happens.
Any additional
How long is the term for?
Here's the issue, is that we typically do the chair and the vice chair in June when we have the terms that end and we start the new terms. So what I would recommend is that we nominate for a period through June 30th of this year and then elect a new chair and vice chair in July.
Some of us have, I guess our appointments end in June, and it depends on whether or not we're, yeah. But I'm going to apply for reappointment. I was filling in for, yeah, really. I was filling in for Councilmember Middleton.
Oh, so what?
Yeah, because she left about a third of the way through her time.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
She, 6 months through.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Well, I guess, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Why are you laughing? Okay, so in reality, we're voting for 5-month term.
Correct.
Yeah, 5-month term. Okay, so, okay. I'm thinking that, yeah, we should, that's it.
I mean, I would feel comfortable supporting the motion, but I want to feel like there's a realistic opportunity after 5 months to be considered again, and not just because there's an incumbent that would, circumscribe, this person being reappointed.
There is nothing in your bylaws which indicates that there is a rotational basis for chair or vice chair, nor is there anything in your bylaws that prevents you from having someone serve consecutive terms as chair or vice chair. So we've left it completely open to the discretion of the planning commissioners in terms of who they choose to appoint as the chair or vice chair.
Commissioner Wermuck?
Yeah, just to that point, when I first came on, we had kind of a tradition that the person who was longest serving was the chair, and they could serve, in fact, some of them served for many years. I think that ended, it ended a half year ago, the tradition, and I don't know that it makes complete sense to revive it. But there was a tradition, but it wasn't a written tradition.
No.
But I think most of the people who were here in that tradition, I think what happened was that many of the people who were longest serving declined to serve in the last
I ended that
election.
tradition.
You declined to serve.
I mean, I was under the impression, and obviously it was a mistaken one, that the vice chair sort of was similar to a mayor pro tem and would step into the position afterwards. Clearly, that's not the case. But that is a good reason why I originally accepted the vice chair position. But if that is not, and it sounds like it's not the way that there are no bylaws that require that, or even
It
stipulate
doesn't
anything
require
like
it, but it's acceptable to do that. And oftentimes, the commission will use the vice chair position to train someone to become chair.
Except that you don't really have much chance to do that until you're stepping in when the chair is absent.
Yeah.
And Kathy will never be absent. I don't think she ever was.
I have a point of order question.
Yes.
So aren't we technically only looking for a chair if the seat of vice chair was already elected in June of last year? That
Not necessarily, no. We typically elect both positions together. So
whenever there's a vacancy, that would
So
trigger
whenever
a
there's a
double election?
vacancy, then we hold the election for both.
I guess that's reasonable. I haven't been on this committee, so I don't know who the best person is to run the committee, and I'm looking forward to working with whoever's best to run the committee. But I think there's a certain, efficiency when the chair and our representative to the committee are the same person, because then they're speaking for the committee at the steering committee, and they're running the meeting here, and their job is to really aggregate everyone's thoughts in both locations.
An interesting point.
Is there any additional discussion on the motion that is before you?
Well, Commissioner Song.
One obvious, is the person's name willing and wholeheartedly devoted to that? Okay.
but I will miss the next meeting.
That's impossible. All right, well, I'll pull my name out because clearly it's not in the cards. So we should vote.
Okay, so you have a motion and a second with Kathy Wehrmuck as chair. Okay, and
Motion passes.
That motion passes. With that, we'll go ahead and take nominations for the vice chair position.
I nominate Peter.
And I second that.
Let's vote.
The permanent position of vice chair. I would certainly be honored to do that.
Thank you.
So is there a motion? We have a second? Then I guess we vote.
Yep.
Yes, I did second it. It just doesn't show up on the screen.
There we go.
On my screen, okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
May I say something? I was the one who nominated Kathy, obviously, and I just want Peter to know that I meant no disrespect to you. I really appreciate the service that you've given us. I mean, you stepped in when Dennis left us and became chair, which is not always the case for vice chair, and you've done an admirable job. I've worked with Kathy for a long time. I really believe in her capabilities as chair, but it is no reflection on you, Peter. I really respect you as a fellow commissioner, and I hope you understand that. And I think I speak for all of us when I thank you for your service. And I'm thrilled that you're going to be coming back as vice chair, and you'll be chair once in a while.
One of these days. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'd like to just support.
Turn the microphone.
I just like to support what Commissioner Donenfeld said. I truly agree with him wholeheartedly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
too. Well, I think that completes today's agenda. And then we can move on.
Now you need to ask about the hotel.
Tova? No. Are there any reports, requests, and comments from members of the commission? Actually, I do have one thing I'd like to bring up. At the last city council meeting, there was discussion, and not an actual vote, I understand, of changing the start time of all boards and commissions to 5:30. And that still is under discussion, I believe.
No, they have approved that at first reading.
So it is 5:30 then?
So it would be with the intent that starting March 1st is when we would move to the new 5:30 start time.
And there would be no option for a commission to make it later? Like 6 p.m. so we can have some, dinner beforehand?
Yeah, I have not received any direction. The word that I have received is that all boards and commissions will start at the same time so that members of the public know that everything starts at 5:30.
Commissioner Wermuck?
Yeah, I actually talked to the mayor about this, and he indicated to me that if the commission made a request to start at 6 o'clock because it's for dinner, because we will probably have some late meetings, that it's something that he would entertain for that, but it needed to be a request of the commission. And I'm wondering, it's not an agendized item, but could we, if people want that, could we informally request it?
What I would actually do is on your next agenda on February the 12th, I will schedule it under Director's Business that we discuss that. That way we can do a formal request of the mayor and city council.
Could I just get a show of hands in terms of whether people think they would request that?
I'd like to explain why, in my mind, it would be helpful. The meetings could go 4 hours. And, my parents used to eat at 5 p.m., but I don't. So 5:30.
Neither does staff.
Yeah, well, and this thing, Commissioner Wood, Councilmember Woods brought up the point that staff now I think, unfortunately, but it probably is good in the long run. We'll have to, work nights a lot, and that's something that you're really making a commitment to, and we appreciate that. So, thank you, staff.
Okay.
But just if people here would give, so Flynn would have an indication of where this commission stands on that issue, and also what staff's preference would be for start time, if in fact there's an openness on council for a board like this.
Let's go ahead and get the just informal input of the Planning Commission members, and maybe let's just go down the row. Commissioner Lewin, 5:30 or 6?
As somebody who works all day, it would be easier for me to attend at 6 p.m. because I could conclude my day's work and then get here.
Okay, Commissioner Irvin?
5:30 or 6, it doesn't make a difference.
Either way, okay. Commissioner Warmack?
I'm happy to do either, but 6 probably, I would support that for people who aren't comfortable with 5:30.
Okay, and Commissioner Song?
I ditto Commissioner Paul for bringing up that point, and I'm in the same situation. So 6 o'clock.
Okay. Commissioner Hirschbein?
Well, I'm not happy for either, but I would go for either, so.
Okay.
6 p.m.
Either is fine by me.
Okay. And again, what I will do is I'll have that as a formal agenda item on February the 12th. And Ms. Wormick, if you're not here, I'll just take your input and forward that as part of the discussion from the 12th.
Right.
I have a question, Flynn. Often, we are bucking up against a city council meeting in this chamber, and we are told to leave, get our business done early. How will, now that we're meeting late, when council typically meets, what will we do logistically with respect to the meeting rooms if we have that problem?
City council meetings are going to be on Thursdays in 2020, and so we are not on the same day any longer. And I'm hoping that occasionally they do move their meetings, but we will discourage them from moving them to a planning commission evening.
Okay, thank you.
Schedule study sessions.
How we would do a study session most likely is that we would start the study session before the planning commission meeting. That's typically what we've done. If that does not work for some of the commissioners, what we might need to do is move the study session to a different evening. Study sessions are not held to the same standards as regular board and commission meetings in terms of having to start at 5:30. But again, I'll take your input in terms of what your preference is. If you'd prefer to do it earlier than the meeting on the same day as your regular meeting, or if you would prefer to do it at 6 p.m. on another night of the week.
Could there be some flexibility in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Commissioner Warwick, did you have something?
Does that has to get approved by Dr. Reddy, or just gets approved by you?
I would advise Mr. Reddy of study session start times, but it does not require approval of either the city manager or the city council.
Commissioner Lewin.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, when is the first meeting that will take place at the evening, based on your understanding?
After March the 1st, and I forget which our first meeting in March is.
Okay. After. Thank you.
It is also the March the 11th will be the first meeting at either 5:30 or 6.
And the second reading will be after our meeting of the 12th.
It will be before. Second reading will be on the 30th.
So the second reading, which was essentially the final,
Yeah,
will already have occurred prior to our discussion.
on the 12th. But you still, as Ms. Wermuck has stated, the mayor will consider the ability of boards and commissions to move their start times. So even if city council approves the ordinance as has been proposed, you still have the ability to request to move that. I believe the language of the ordinance is that they start no sooner than 5:30 in the evening, with the mandate that all boards and commissions start at the same time. However, apparently they will allow an exception.
I don't know that the whole council has said that. The only person I talked to about this was the mayor.
Okay, so again, we will see the direction that we get once we have a unified voice from the Planning Commission.
All right. We have other reports, requests, and comments?
Mr. Chair, you had asked the staff their preference, and they said for us to say our preference, but I'm still eager to know what staff's preference is.
We are happy to do either. It does not, it does not make a difference to us one way or the other. My staff will go on a dinner break an hour before the start of the meeting, so we'll make sure that they have time to have dinner before.
I'm glad that everyone will be well fed. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Song, did you have something?
So a couple of things. The Parker project, I noticed this was the next meeting. There's no application being submitted. Do you happen to know what the applicant decided to do as their next step?
The applicant met with members of all three communities that surround them yesterday afternoon. I don't know what they have decided, if they want to proceed to the next Planning Commission meeting on February the 12th. They have time to do notice for that meeting, so it's still a possibility, but they haven't decided yet.
Was there anybody from staff there?
Yes, Ms. Kikuchi was there in attendance at the meeting, as well as Mr. Minjares.
Commissioner Wermuth?
I sat in on that last meeting, and it looked to me as if it would be very helpful to have a study session on that. There were complicated issues in terms of what happened to each of the HOAs that are surrounding the Parker and how that would get resolved, as well as the special permit issues that got raised. So I just think the commission might really benefit from being able to ask extensive questions before it comes before us. And obviously, that's your choice.
I think that's a good idea.
What is the applicant?
Excuse me?
Right, I believe the applicant needs to want to enter into that process.
No, it's okay. I'm just saying I would.
Yeah, no.
Not necessarily. The Planning Commission in the past has directed staff that they would like to have study sessions on issues. And so that's something that the Planning Commission can determine if it's beneficial.
Okay, I learned something. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Before I always bring up my TOVA, my favorite topic for our new commissioners. The property that's just south of Rick's Restaurant on North Palm Canyon on the west side, which looks like a frame of a building with no walls. It's called TOVA, has looked like that for quite some time. And I understand, and I was hoping that the planning director could just update us on what has transpired since our last meeting.
Okay. In terms of code enforcement action, I don't have any new information other than the city is proceeding with code enforcement action. There was recently, I believe either last week or the week before, a meeting with the developer and the mayor and the city manager. I was in attendance at that meeting, wherein the developer was encouraged to hold a neighborhood meeting to share his update with residents who are there in the immediate area. If members of the Planning Commission would like to be invited to that meeting, we will certainly send you an invite to that meeting as well if you would like to attend. The developer in the meeting with the mayor and the city manager indicated that they are in the process of completing their financing for the project. They expect to have their building permits approved within approximately 90 to 120 days, and that would include the 2 new buildings in front with the underground parking as part of that. So that was the information that they had conveyed to us. I can't remember if you and I talked about anything else, Mr. Maruzzi.
No, I think I'll talk to some of the other individuals that were there, but if there is an opportunity for one of the planning commissions, I certainly would volunteer to do that.
Okay, certainly. We will invite you to that neighborhood meeting as well.
Have they applied for a permit?
They have their permits in for everything but the 2 buildings in front. So the back portion of the property, the permits have been in. I don't believe that they've been issued yet, but they have been approved by the Building and Safety Department. I don't believe that they have submitted the permits for the 2 buildings in front, but they indicated that they are nearly at the point of being ready to do that.
Thank you.
Again, this is just to use a shout out for the new mayor who has made this a priority, that all the projects that have been unfinished for some time will get an update quarterly, but clearly they're meeting beforehand to find out what's going on and hopefully motivate them to finish projects. So that's really good. All right. Anything else before we move on to Planning Director? Comments? Reports? All ready?
You have already brought up the 5:30 meeting time, so I don't need to do that since we've already had that discussion, and thank you for that. One of the things that Councilmember Woods, when he was Commissioner Woods, brought up is would we be able to put money in the budget for training of planning commissioners? I'm happy to report that this year it looks like I will have some additional funds. And so what I'm proposing is that we have funding available to send one of the planning commissioners, fortunately it's only one, to the National American Planning Association Conference, which will be held in Houston this year. And it's going to be on the dates of April 25th to the 28th. And so again, we will have funding available to send one of the commissioners to the National Planning Conference. And there is no way to determine who would be the best person to send. Again, I'm going to let you select from among yourselves. April 25th through the 28th. You might want to do it by the most senior member. You might want to do it by chair, vice chair. I don't know. I'm going to, again, leave that up to you, but I can send one member of the Planning Commission. If you'd like, we can do that as a discussion item at the next meeting, so that way you all have time to think about who might be the best person to send this year. The idea is that we would try and rotate through our membership once we've sent one person, that we would then...
Who has attended in the past?
We haven't had anyone attend in the past.
Never had this opportunity.
Yeah, we haven't had the money for about the past 8 or 9 years, I don't think.
Because council members have gone. I think J.R. Roberts attended once.
Perhaps, yes.
Commissioner Wormuck?
Yeah, not in my tenure here has anyone attended. Is this the best way of using that money, though? Are there trainings that might be more local where more of the commissioners could attend?
There is the possibility of sending our commissioners to the state American Planning Association conference. This year, the conference will be in Riverside, and that will be held in September. That would be next year's budget funds, so we don't have to look at those as competing entities, that we would be able to send someone to the National Planning Conference with this year's budget, and then in September, we could send multiple members of the commission to the state conference.
I might add, I did in my early years on the commission, I attended the state conference. And I found it to be, and I was sort of new, and I found it to be extremely helpful. And particularly, they have a whole section for board governance, because a lot of board members go. But I found that I was much more informed by the planners' seminars as opposed to board governance, because we get our ethics training here. I think the city does a great job about the appropriate way to behave as a commissioner and as a city representative. But to learn the law of planning, I think it was a very, very helpful experience for me.
Yeah. Mr. Hirschbein.
I know we're not picking the commissioner for that honor yet, but I would recommend that one of our newer planning commissioners go, because, you know, us old people have had, you know, learning by experience, I guess. And so if we can sort of bootstrap up some of the newer people to learn, I think that would be my recommendation.
Commissioner Lewin?
I was going to say, I do think it's important that we have this conversation at a future meeting so that everybody can consult their calendars and think about the right way to handle it, since it's not that time sensitive.
Yep.
And then the other question I had was whether commissioners could attend on their own dime if they wanted to. I don't know how public or not this
Yeah,
is.
absolutely. Let me do this. Let me send you information on both the National APA Conference in April and then the State APA Conference in September. I'll include the registration fee cost so that you have an understanding of what that is. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more than what I would like it to be, let me put it that way. But I believe that we would be able to send multiple members to the state conference in September, but I will forward that information to you also. You can look it over prior to our next meeting on February the 12th.
Commissioner Ervin.
Flynn, would you say that the meeting for the national would be something for a new planning commission, or would you say it would be something for someone more
Either
seasoned?
way, I think it would be appropriate either for someone who is new or for some of the more experienced members on the Planning Commission. What is interesting about the national conference is you tend to hear more about trends that are happening across the country. The state conference, one of the benefits of the state conference is it tends to focus on issues that are unique to California. So again, I wouldn't say that the national is a better training ground for a new planning commissioner. In fact, the state conference might be a better training ground for new commissioners.
Commissioner Warmock?
I just, since I'm not here next week, I would tend to like to see one of the new commissioners go. I think it would be helpful and probably exciting and make this job maybe even make it more appealing.
All right, Commissioner.
I will say
Delgado.
this, planners are not party animals, so it's not exactly.
And with that,
It's
I would like to move.
it's a step above undertakers, but that's,
Let's move this to another meeting.
We will do that. That's all that I have to report, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay.
Regarding the AAC meetings, when will those be?
We'll have that for you at the next meeting.
So we're signing it up, but we don't know when.
You're asking when the list will be done or when
No, no,
the
no.
attendance for the next meeting is?
What, so we're signing up by month, but I'm just asking, are those meetings at 5:30 also?
Yes.
Starting in March, they will be.
Starting in March. And what day of the week?
Those will be on Monday,
Mondays at 5:30.
correct.
Okay.
And there's 2 meetings a month or 1?
2 meetings a month, on the first and the third Wednesday of
We
the
have a
month.
Delightful social calendar ahead of us. Drinks after the meeting?
Oh, you said
right.
Mondays. Mondays or Wednesdays?
Mondays.
Mondays, sorry.
All righty. Anything else before we adjourn?
The only thing I would like to say is welcome to our new commissioners. Very happy to have you on board. And to our 4 stalwart commissioners, thank you for holding it together while we only had 4 members, and especially to Mr. Vice Chair Maruzzi for running the meetings and conducting the business. We appreciate you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we adjourn to the meeting of February 12th, 2020.